So if you follow anything in the tech world or you are a career professional of some sort, you probably noticed this week, the week of October 20th, 2025, that there was a shutdown or an outage of Amazon's web services. AWS is what it's known as, and you probably seen ads if you watch football. I believe there's, AWS sponsors some of the analytics segments that they'll do during the games. I think it's like Sunday Night Football. And it's really interesting because it has me thinking where I'm at right now. In my last video, I kind of talked about this a little bit as far as just like, big corporations and sort of dominating certain spaces and sort of moving the needle when it comes to culture in a way. And so AWS, it was interesting. It crashed, and just realizing how much of a footprint that Amazon has in this sort of cloud service space. So I was looking it up because you get on LinkedIn and you see some of the top news articles, and it was AWS has outages, and then I log into work that day, and there's certain programs that we use every day that were down just because they rely on AWS to store their data, and it just kind of had me thinking more about sort of some of, from a macro sense, the reliance on a handful of companies when it comes to certain services, and it almost seems like a house of cards. But before I get into that, I want to say that my name is Ryan Holguin. Welcome to the Practical Place, where I like to talk about things regarding career growth, project management, because that's my field of work, and also I like to dabble in sports and what's also going on in the culture. So like a news sort of economic side, just because I'm interested in that. And so if any of those topics interest you, I would encourage you to subscribe. Got a little over 300 subscribers here. So come along for the journey, and hopefully you find this video helpful and fruitful for you. So regarding AWS and the house of cards I was talking about, I looked it up because, big companies like Snapchat, I think Netflix, Disney, a lot of these major companies rely on AWS in some capacity to store and house their data. And I was researching it and kind of just doing a few searches, and it says as of 2025, at the end of Q2, about 18% of Amazon's revenue is from AWS. So about 1/5 nearly of their revenue is AWS. So it said at the end of 2024, $107.5 billion of revenue was AWS. And it's just so interesting that on a macro sense, all these companies, a lot of banking companies, and there's really no rule that I saw. Maybe you guys can correct me where, they may not be allowed to, let's say theoretically, sell the same service, web service, data service to, let's say all the banks. And then let's say there was an outage, then all the banks would sort of be shut down. And so it's kind of an interesting situation as I was looking that, back in 05, 06, when they rolled out AWS, they really had a minimal amount of market share. Just from looking here, it's like Rackspace, which is IBM, HP, they had a majority of the market share at the time in 05, 06, and now it's dominated. It says AWS has 31 to 33% of the market share in this cloud space, data space. Azure, which is Microsoft, owns about 23 to 25% of the market share, and then Google Cloud owns 11 to 13% of the market share. And so the funny thing is in about 05, just per this chart here, and I'll try to share it on the screen, it says that all three of those companies had really no market share. But in a matter of, 20 years, they're now dominating the space. Like everybody runs off of, probably these three players, which is so crazy. And some company uses all three of them in different instances or cases. And so it's just so, I don't know. It's so weird and crazy to me just thinking about just the reliance on certain things. And this is our society. And this is more of a macro conversation. And I want to distill it down to a micro sense here in a minute, just as I think about it in my own life. Just how we rely so much on a handful of companies to live our lives, to run our businesses. And in some ways, I'm not advocating to fight against it, or I'm not to start a revolution. I'm not advocating for anything like that. It's just really interesting to think about where we're at today and how a lot of our society, economy is ran off of a few large corporations, and you can tie it to they're publicly traded. There's an incentive for them to do this to go global, to appease Wall Street, to appease shareholders, to appease folks like that. Private companies. I'm not saying private companies are innocent, but maybe there's not as much of an incentive for world domination because they're just really invested in the future of their company, and that just might look a little bit different. I'm not making statements about private over public companies. I'm just thinking out loud, but it is interesting to think about this and how in the snap of a finger, multiple companies, even industries, can just go down based on one company's outage because all of those companies are reliant on one company. And it has me thinking personally, and maybe this is a reach, but personally in my life, and maybe I would encourage you to think about it in yours, like, are there things am I living my life in a way where I am reliant on things outside of myself? So let's talk about AI, for instance. Like, am I using AI as a crutch that's stunting my growth as a person, and I'm not becoming a subject matter expert on anything? I'm not reading books. I'm not, theoretically, I'm not reading books. I'm not reading articles. I just plug a book into an AI tool, or plug an article into an AI tool, have it summarize me, but I never go on that journey of learning something and actually retaining that information. And then I sort of become pretty replaceable because I'm limiting the value that I can bring to a company, to my own life, to the people around me, because I'm so reliant on other things that at any moment can be taken away from me. And so that's sort of my challenge to myself is like, am I living my life in a way, and am I trying to grow in my career? Am I trying to grow professionally, personally, in a way that's actually going to cultivate long-term growth? Or am I just shortcutting myself in the future by kind of learning so quick? It's all about automation, all about efficiency, all about go, but it's not all about the journey of sitting there, learning, retaining information, going through that hard process of reading, digesting, thinking critically for myself. But is my life a house of cards, if you will? Kind of like what we saw this week with a lot of companies reliant on Amazon Web Services. And I'm not saying that that's bad or wrong. I just think it's interesting. A quote I always think about is like, when you invent the ship, you invent the shipwreck. So, there's so many great innovations that we've made as humanity, as people, but with that comes consequences. And in this case, the consequence is when one company's services is down, then it's an industry's down. Wall Street's freaking out. But let's say this was regionally. Let's say that there was a web service for a certain region or a certain city, a few zip codes, and then there was another one a few zip codes later, and then there was another one, and there was a multitude of different cloud-based companies that could offer services. So if one went down, absolutely, it's inconvenient, really hard for those companies affected, but it's not a sort of macro disaster as if what people are talking about it online to be. So anyways, something I was thinking about today, this week, as I read that and kind of meditating on it in a macro sense and in a micro sense. That's what I like to do. That's why I call this a practical place, because I try to make things sort of practical in my own mind and then share that, and maybe it's helpful to you, maybe it's not. But if you found this video helpful, fruitful, insightful, I would encourage you to like it. Subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed. Keep growing this community here, and let's start a dialogue. Give me some comments on this whole situation, on your thoughts in the comments below. Was it a reach to try to connect it to our personal lives and how we're living our lives, or was it not? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, my name is Ryan Holguin. I will see you in the next video.